The clatter of dishes and low murmur of conversations filled the dimly lit restaurant, but in one corner, time seemed to stop. Leila wiped a bead of sweat from her brow as she balanced a tray loaded with steaming bowls of ramen. Another night, another tip that might not even cover rent, but she was used to it. She'd learned early on that life rewarded neither complaints nor hesitation. Move quickly, stay quiet, never make waves. That was the code. Until him. The door swung open with a heavy push, letting in the icy November air and the unmistakable scent of power, expensive cologne, leather, and something darker underneath. He walked in like a shadow, tall, impeccably tailored in a suit that seemed cut from midnight itself. The room instinctively leaned back as if the air had shifted around him. Table 12. Right in the center in plain view. Leila's steps faltered. The man, the Mafia boss, was infamous, a name whispered even among the city's most dangerous circles. His entourage, hand-picked and ruthless, flanked him, their eyes scanning the restaurant like predators circling prey. The soft background hum of diners suddenly felt fragile, as if any wrong move could shatter it. She approached cautiously, careful not to meet his eyes, careful not to show fear. But she couldn't stop her ears from picking up his words, the ones that would make the rest of the night unforgettable. He spoke in Korean, sharp and cutting, each syllable dripping with derision. "You, black girl, can you even pronounce these dishes?" The words were a whip, meant to humiliate, meant to wound. The restaurant froze. Chopsticks paused midair, phones tilted to catch the moment, forks hovering over unfinished plates. Even the chef, standing by the pass, seemed to hold his breath. Leila's heart thudded, hot and fast. She'd faced rude customers before, careless insults and prejudice, but something about him made her blood run cold. He wasn't just arrogant. He radiated danger, the kind that could swallow people whole and leave no trace behind. And yet, something inside her refused to shrink. 3 words formed on her lips before her mind could stop them. Not out of anger, not even out of fear, but from a place deeper, something older, something unyielding. "Don't ever speak." The restaurant seemed to crack under the weight of those words. The Mafia boss blinked, then froze. The smirk slipped from his face, his entourage stilled, their laughter evaporating like smoke. Every eye in the room darted between the powerful man and the young waitress, wondering who would blink first. Leila's hands remained steady on the tray, though her pulse pounded in her temples. She hadn't planned to say anything. She had simply done what she knew was right. Somehow, in that moment, courage had won. And maybe, just maybe, she had started something that couldn't be undone. In that heartbeat of tension, a question hovered, unspoken. Who was this girl who dared to speak like that? Leila's life before tonight had been painfully ordinary, a rhythm of survival that left little room for defiance. She had grown up in a small, crowded apartment with her mother, a woman whose strength was carved from decades of hardship. Her mother had often said, "Life will try to make you small. Don't let it. Speak when it matters." Those words had guided her for years. But never had they been tested like this. Never in the presence of someone whose power could ruin her with a single decision. The restaurant itself was a modest but cozy Korean diner tucked between a florist and a laundromat. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't a place where the city's elite normally lingered. But for tonight, it had become the stage for something bigger than bowls of ramen or the daily grind. It had become a battleground of pride, courage, and survival. Leila moved past table 12 with her tray, serving the Mafia boss's order, her hands steady though her body trembled inside. Every small movement was calculated, precise, careful not to provoke further anger. But the moment she laid down the first plate, she felt his eyes on her.
piercing,
curious, measuring. It was as if he hadn't heard her words, as if he couldn't believe a mere waitress could defy him and live. And yet he didn't move, didn't lash out. For now, the moment held a fragile, electric silence that left everyone in the restaurant suspended. Leila took a deep breath and forced her mind back to the rules she had learned long ago. Keep your head down, finish your shift, and go home. But something had shifted. The air was charged, thick with tension and something more. A whisper of respect, perhaps, or the thrill of a challenge. She wondered briefly if anyone else would have had the courage to say what she did. And that thought gave her a tiny spark of pride. Have you ever had a moment where you stood up to someone far more powerful than you, even when every instinct screamed to stay silent? The thought was fleeting, but it lingered. And she knew that somewhere in the restaurant, someone, maybe a diner, maybe a staff member, was thinking the same thing. The Mafia boss finally spoke again, softer this time, almost curious. You have spirit, he said, still in Korean, but with a hint of something that wasn't anger. It was an acknowledgement, a challenge. Leila didn't reply. She just set the next plate down, her hand steady, her gaze forward. She knew better than to underestimate him, or herself. Across the room, the other diners whispered, stealing glances, some raising their phones subtly, recording what they could. Rumors would spread. Videos would circulate. And somehow, in the midst of the evening rush, Leila realized that nothing would ever feel ordinary again. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel small. As the night stretched on, she went about her work, taking orders, refilling water, delivering food, but her mind kept circling back to table 12. The man with the sharp eyes and sharper words had disrupted more than her shift. He had disrupted the rhythm of her life. Somewhere deep down, she knew tonight was the start of something she couldn't yet name. Something dangerous. Something thrilling. Something that might test every lesson her mother had ever taught her. And for a brief, fleeting second, Leila allowed herself to wonder, what would it mean to truly stand her ground, no matter the cost? The tension in the restaurant hung like a thick fog, but amid it, Leila felt a strange kind of calm. Fear was still there, yes, but it was tempered with something stronger, pride, resolve, and an understanding that sometimes one small act could ripple far beyond the room. The night had only just begun, and in the shadows of table 12, the Mafia boss watched her, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Sometimes, one moment of courage changes everything. Have you ever surprised yourself by standing up for what's right, even when the odds were against you? Think about it as you follow Leila's story, because tonight, her choices are only the beginning. The night air in the restaurant grew heavier as the dinner rush settled into an uneasy rhythm. Diners murmured quietly, stealing glances at table 12 as if watching a living storm. Leila moved from table to table, refilling water, collecting empty plates, but she could feel his gaze following her, cold and deliberate. Every glance reminded her that the 3 words she had spoken were no ordinary act of defiance. They were a challenge, and she didn't know yet what challenge she had just ignited. She shook her head, trying to focus on the routine of her shift. Ramen to table 5. Drinks to table 7. Takeout orders ready for pickup. Everything mechanical. Everything predictable. And yet, nothing felt predictable anymore. It was then that he spoke again, this time in English, slow, deliberate, each word cutting through the hum of the restaurant like a blade. Leila. Her name rolled off his tongue as though he had been savoring it. The sound of her name in that context made her pulse stutter. She froze mid-step, the tray nearly tipping in her hands. Every muscle in her body tensed. Yes? She managed to whisper, her voice steadier than she felt. He leaned back in his chair, one hand draped casually over the table, the other tapping lightly on the polished surface. I like a woman who speaks without fear. But fear is useful. It teaches respect. And respect is earned. The words were unnerving.
Cryptic.
A warning disguised as a compliment. Leila nodded politely, placing the drinks on the table. But inside, her mind raced. What did he mean? Was he testing her? Threatening her? Or was it something else entirely? Before she could gather her thoughts, he snapped his fingers, and one of his men stood. Leave the girl here. I want her to finish my meal. The request sent a shiver down her spine. She had heard of Mafia bosses being unpredictable, dangerous, but this was personal. He wanted her involved in something, though she had no idea what. Sir, she started, but he waved her off. Just stay. Observe.
Speak only if I ask.
That's an order. Her knees felt weak, but she forced herself to nod. The other staff members exchanged glances, some worried, some wide-eyed, and the chef muttered under his breath, shaking his head. None of them spoke out loud. No one dared. Leila moved to stand near table 12, tray forgotten for the moment, as the Mafia boss surveyed the restaurant. Then he did something unexpected. He leaned in closer, his gaze locking onto hers. You are not like the others. You have fire. Do you know why fire is dangerous? Her stomach twisted. Because it can burn, she said cautiously. He smirked. Because it reveals what's hidden in the shadows. The words chilled her more than any threat could. Shadows. Secrets. Hidden dangers. And suddenly, she realized, this was no ordinary dinner. Something bigger was unfolding, something that could put her in the middle of a storm she didn't even know existed. The moment passed, but the tension lingered. Leila tried to focus on her work, but the night had shifted irrevocably. Everything around her felt sharper, more vivid. The clink of utensils, the low hum of conversation, even the soft flicker of candlelight on each table seemed to pulse with significance. Then came the first clue that this was far more than a simple dinner. A folded piece of paper, slid under her arm by one of his men while she refilled drinks, caught her off guard. She looked around, but the man had already melted back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it. The paper was blank, except for 3 words scrawled in precise, elegant handwriting. Watch and listen. Leila swallowed hard. What did that mean? Who had left it? And why her? Her pulse quickened, but so did a flicker of curiosity. Danger and mystery intertwined, calling to something inside her she had never acknowledged, the part that longed for adventure, for answers, for truth. She glanced at the Mafia boss. His eyes were on her again, sharp and unyielding. And yet, something unreadable lingered there. Expectation? Amusement? Or something deeper? She realized for the first time tonight that the entire restaurant had become a stage, and she was not merely a waitress anymore. She was part of a performance, a dangerous dance with someone who could ruin her in an instant, or reveal a world she had never known. Over the next hour, the interactions became a delicate game. The Mafia boss made cryptic comments to her, spoke to her in Korean occasionally, watching carefully for her reactions. She had studied Korean for years, mostly through movies and old language tapes, but she had never spoken it under pressure. Never with someone like this. And yet, every word he said, every gesture, forced her mind to sharpen, to adapt, to survive. She realized that the more he pushed, the more she pushed back, not with defiance, but with intelligence. Calm, precise words, small observations that didn't reveal fear, but didn't provoke him either. A careful balance of courage and caution. And the other diners? They were silent spectators, stealing glances, whispering behind menus, capturing her every movement on their phones. The moment she had spoken 3 words had rippled farther than she imagined. Her courage had become contagious. Leila felt something strange, pride mixed with anxiety, the thrill of standing her ground against someone untouchable. And then, a thought flickered in her mind, almost like a whisper. What if this moment changes everything? Then the night took a darker turn. A diner at the far end of the restaurant, a man she had noticed before, suddenly froze. His hand shook as he lifted a glass, his eyes darting to table 12 with a mix of fear and recognition. Something about him made Leila uneasy. She didn't know why, but instinct told her to watch him closely. The Mafia boss noticed it too. His gaze shifted, piercing, calculating. "Do you see that?" he said softly, almost to himself. "The world is full of people hiding, and I know which ones are lying." The man's hand dropped the glass, the sound shattering the delicate tension. Whispers spread like wildfire. Phones were raised, some diners gasping audibly. Leila's heart pounded. Whatever was happening, she had stumbled into a web she couldn't yet see, one that involved the Mafia, hidden agendas, and perhaps even danger far beyond anything she had faced before. And still she stayed.
Still, she watched.
Still she listened. Because something in her, something stubborn and unyielding, refused to run. As the night dragged on, the pieces of the puzzle began to appear in small fragments, cryptic glances, whispered conversations, a hand passing a folded note across the floor unnoticed by the others. Leila pieced them together cautiously, her mind working faster than ever. The danger was real, yes, but so was the intrigue. The pull of the unknown, the lure of secrets waiting to be uncovered, was irresistible. She realized something crucial. Tonight was no longer just about serving food. Tonight was about survival, strategy, and the first step into a world that could either destroy her or elevate her beyond anything she had imagined. And deep down, a question formed in her mind, a question she knew she would carry for the rest of her life. Am I brave enough to see this through? The night deepened, and the restaurant's soft lighting seemed to press in, turning every shadow into a possible threat. Leila's mind was racing faster than ever. Each glance from the Mafia boss carried layers she could not yet decipher. Was it interest? Curiosity? Or the cold, calculating assessment of someone used to finding weakness in others? She tried to focus on her work, but the tension made each step heavier. Each plate she carried like it could tip under the weight of unseen forces. Her instincts, sharpened by years of struggle, told her that tonight would not end normally, if it ended at all. It started subtly. A napkin slid across the table to her, delicate and precise. She picked it up, folding it carefully in her palm. Written in the same elegant script as the earlier note were 3 words: "Trust no one." Her stomach dropped. It was a warning, a puzzle, a threat? She didn't know, but her pulse spiked with adrenaline. The note wasn't left by a diner. It wasn't part of the restaurant. It was connected to him, to table 12. Before she could process it, one of the Mafia boss's men leaned in and whispered something in Korean she only partially understood. Her stomach churned as she realized the man's words were not instructions. They were a test, a trap. And then it happened. From the far corner of the restaurant, a subtle movement caught her eye. A young man sitting alone, glancing repeatedly toward table 12. He seemed out of place, too casual for the upscale dinner crowd, yet too alert to be harmless. Leila's instinct screamed. She followed him with her eyes, noticing how his hand slipped under the table, then emerged holding a small, rectangular device. A camera? A phone? She wasn't sure, but she knew enough. Someone was recording this. Someone was watching. The Mafia boss noticed it too. His eyes narrowed, and the soft smirk disappeared entirely. For a moment, he was pure predator. He motioned subtly, and two of his men moved almost invisibly, cutting off the line of sight between the young man and Table 12. Leila's heart hammered. She realized then that she was in a web far larger than herself, a web that could trap anyone who dared step too close. And yet, despite the danger, a part of her thrilled at the challenge. She had never been the kind of person to back down when stakes were high. Courage and fear had always danced inside her, and tonight, courage was winning. The first major twist arrived without warning. The Mafia boss leaned forward slightly, his voice calm, deliberate, almost casual. "Leila, do you know why I brought you here?" Her mind froze. I'm not sure, sir," she answered cautiously, careful not to reveal the pounding of her heart. His lips curved into a slow, almost predatory smile. "You're clever, observant, and that's why I need you." Need her? The words echoed in her mind like a bell in a cathedral. Need her? She had assumed she was being tested, trapped, or mocked. But need her? That thought was impossible. "You need me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," he said simply. "And not for what you think. There are people in this city who hide behind masks. Some are allies, some are enemies. But you might just be able to see the difference before it's too late." Leila's mind spun. Allies and enemies? Hidden masks? Danger? This was no ordinary dinner. This was a battlefield of secrets. Before she could ask more questions, her attention was drawn to the young man with the device. He tried to slip out unnoticed, but the Mafia boss's gaze caught him instantly. One flick of his hand, and the man froze in place, fear etched into every line of his body. The Mafia boss spoke again, low and dangerous, but with an unmistakable authority. "He has been lying to you. Every word, every gesture a lie. Trust no one in this room." Leila's blood ran cold. The first note wasn't just a warning, it was confirmation. Someone was betraying her, and she had no idea who. Her mind raced back to the people around her. The diners? Innocent. The staff? Mostly. But someone close. Maybe even someone she trusted without question. Her pulse accelerated as she realized the depth of the danger. One wrong move, one misplaced glance, one careless word, and everything could unravel. And then, another twist, a revelation so shocking it nearly stole her breath. The Mafia boss reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a photograph. He laid it on the table before her. The image was unmistakable. It was her mother, standing beside a man Leila didn't recognize, a man whose face was sharp and dangerous, his presence commanding. Leila's fingers trembled as she reached for it. Her mother in the orbit of this man? The lines between her past and this present blurred. She had always thought she knew her life, her struggles, her history. And now it was all a lie. "You see," the Mafia boss said softly, almost gently, "everything you know is a fragment. There are truths hidden, Leila. Secrets that could change everything you believe about your world and about yourself." Her mind whirled. Questions collided with fear, with curiosity, with something else she couldn't name. And amid it all, one thought remained crystal clear. She could not trust anyone. Not tonight. Not here. Not even herself fully. As if to drive the point home, the young man with the device made one final, desperate attempt. He lunged for her, grabbing at the edge of her apron. But in a blur, one of the Mafia boss's men intercepted him, pulling him back with effortless strength. The man's face went pale as he realized he had underestimated the reach of Table 12. Leila stepped back, shaken, but she didn't run. Not yet. She had learned, over years of struggle, that survival wasn't about fear. It was about awareness, courage, and the ability to act when every instinct screamed to hide. And then the Mafia boss looked at her, his gaze piercing, almost challenging. You see, Leila, tonight is just the beginning. Everything else, the betrayals, the lies, the secrets, they will come to light soon. You can leave. You can walk away. But if you stay, you will see the truth. And you will be changed forever. Leila's mind flashed with 1,000 questions, but she realized one thing. Leaving was no longer an option.
Not now.
Not tonight. The thread of courage, the spark that had flared with 3 simple words, had pulled her too far. And the pull of the unknown, the thrill of danger, the promise of answers, was irresistible. For the first time, she allowed herself a fleeting thought, a reflection on the night that had spiraled so far beyond ordinary. Have you ever discovered a truth so shocking that it made you question everything you believed? Leila knew that tonight, her choices were no longer about serving ramen or surviving a shift. They were about navigating a world of hidden agendas, betrayal, and dangerous truths. And for the first time, she felt the intoxicating mix of fear and exhilaration, alive in a way she had never known. The restaurant held its collective breath. Diners whispered, some frozen in fear, others captivated by the silent tension. Phones captured fragments of the drama. And amid it all, Leila realized that she was no longer just a waitress. She was a player, a witness, and perhaps even a key to a game far bigger than she could imagine. And as the night stretched on, she understood something vital. Tonight, she had stepped into a world where courage mattered more than caution. And every choice she made from this point forward could mean life or death. The restaurant no longer felt like a safe place. The soft lighting, once warm and comforting, now cast long, ominous shadows. Every corner seemed to conceal unseen eyes. Every whisper carried the weight of threat. Leila moved mechanically, clearing tables and refilling drinks, but inside, her mind spun with possibilities she couldn't fully comprehend. She couldn't shake the photograph of her mother with the unknown man, the one the Mafia boss had shown her. It had shaken something deep inside, a memory she didn't know she had, fleeting fragments of whispered conversations, half-finished stories, and the feeling that her past was not her own. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried another tray to table 12. The Mafia boss watched silently, a predator content to let his prey understand the depth of the trap before moving in for the kill. Or perhaps it wasn't a trap at all, but she couldn't know. And that uncertainty gnawed at her, threading fear through every nerve in her body. The first blow came unexpectedly. The young man, the one who had tried to reach her, was back, this time accompanied by a woman Leila recognized from across the restaurant. She hadn't paid much attention to her before. She had been another diner, innocuous, polite. But now, her presence made Leila's skin prickle with unease. The woman's eyes were sharp, calculating. She watched Leila, noting her every move, every reaction. Then, almost imperceptibly, she spoke into a small microphone hidden in her collar. The sound was too soft for anyone else to hear, but Leila's instincts caught it. Someone was orchestrating this. Someone had planned for her reaction, for her every decision. Panic fluttered in Leila's chest. Her heart beat faster, her throat dry. She had faced rude customers, intimidating strangers, and dangerous situations before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just about fear. It was about survival, about understanding a world where every smile could hide a blade. And then the Mafia boss leaned forward, his voice cutting through the tension like steel. Leila, you are learning quickly. But the world is cruel, and it will not forgive mistakes.
Tonight, you will see the truth of that.
Watch carefully. The woman with the microphone stepped closer, subtly passing a folded note across the floor. Leila's eyes darted to it, then back to table 12. She knew instinctively that it was meant for her, but reaching for it could draw attention. Every move now had consequences she could barely measure. Finally, after a heartbeat of hesitation, she bent down and unfolded it. 3 words. Simple, but devastating.
He knows everything.
Leila froze. Her mind reeled. He knows everything? Who? The Mafia boss? The young man? My mother?
Me?
Her pulse thundered. The photograph. The notes. The man recording. The whispers. It all fit together in a terrifying puzzle she wasn't ready to solve. And yet, she had no choice but to act. Retreat was impossible. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but flight would reveal weakness, and weakness tonight could be fatal. Time slowed. The restaurant itself seemed to hold its breath, as if sensing the storm about to break. Diners whispered nervously, their phones raised discreetly to capture the tension. Staff members stole glances, unsure whether to intervene or hide. Leila felt a cold sweat prickling her skin. Every option seemed worse than the last. The weight of the unknown pressed on her chest, suffocating and heavy. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. She was completely alone. No allies, no safe corners, no second chances. The Mafia boss's voice broke through the haze of fear. Do you understand, Leila? This is the price of curiosity, the price of courage. You cannot choose ignorance here. You will either face the truth or be consumed by it. Suddenly, the young man made his move again. He lunged toward the Mafia boss, a desperate act, perhaps meant to rescue her, or perhaps to manipulate her. But in an instant, one of the boss's men intercepted him with effortless strength, pinning him to the ground. The sound of the scuffle drew the attention of diners. Phones lifted higher, capturing the chaos. Leila's knees nearly buckled. Her hands were frozen on a tray she barely held. This is it, she thought. This is where everything falls apart. But then, in the chaos, she noticed something she hadn't before. The woman who had passed the note was slipping out through the kitchen door unnoticed. She wasn't just a spectator. She was a courier, a spy, a player in this deadly game. And she had something important, something that could change everything. The realization sparked a flicker of courage in Leila. Fear still churned in her stomach, but a sharper emotion overrode it: determination. She had been underestimated, watched, manipulated, but she wasn't helpless. Not yet. She moved quickly, almost instinctively, her steps precise, as she followed the woman through the narrow corridor behind the kitchen. The sounds of the restaurant faded behind her, replaced by the low hum of fluorescent lights and the faint hiss of a steam vent. The woman turned, startled, but it was too late. Leila had caught her, gripping her wrist firmly. "What's in the note?" Leila demanded, her voice low but steady. The woman hesitated, then sighed, realizing she had no choice. "It's about your mother, about what she really knew and who she worked for." Leila's mind raced. Her mother? The photograph? All the fragments of memory that had haunted her life? They were no longer fragments. They were pieces of a puzzle she had only now begun to see in full. But the revelation came with a cost. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. The Mafia boss's voice rang out, low and lethal. "Leila, leaving without permission is dangerous. Very dangerous." Panic surged. The woman tried to pull away, but Leila held firm. In the distance, the shadow of the Mafia boss's men approached rapidly, cutting off the corridor behind her. Her heart pounded. She realized, with cold clarity, that she was trapped. Every option, every escape route, every plan had vanished. Tonight, she would confront the truth, or it would consume her. In that moment, standing in the cold corridor, with shadows pressing in and secrets swirling around her like smoke, Leila understood the gravity of her situation. The night had started with 3 simple words, spoken in defiance. It had led her here, to the edge of something dangerous and magnificent. She could feel it in every nerve. The choices she made tonight would echo far beyond the walls of the restaurant. And for the first time, she realized that courage alone might not be enough. She would need cunning, insight, and a willingness to face truths that could shatter everything she thought she knew. And yet, a part of her didn't hesitate. She gripped the woman's wrist tighter, pulling the folded note from her hand. She would read it. She would understand. And she would act. Because running was no longer an option. Because tonight, Leila had stepped into a darkness from which there would be no simple escape. And in that darkness, she would find the first spark of her own power. When everything seems lost and danger surrounds you on every side, do you run or do you stand your ground? Could you be brave enough to uncover the truth, even when it terrifies you? Think about it as you follow Leila's journey, because her darkest hour is just beginning. Leila's heart hammered as she emerged from the small office, the photographs and notes clutched tightly in her hands. The restaurant seemed transformed, the warm glow of chandeliers now sharp and almost accusing. Every shadow felt like it was alive, stretching across walls and floors, hiding secrets and threats she could no longer ignore. Her plan was simple in theory. Return to table 12, confront the Mafia boss with evidence she had pieced together, and assert herself without giving away fear. But the execution would require nerves of steel, razor-sharp timing, and an intuition honed by years of surviving danger. She stepped carefully, her movements calculated, the clink of her shoes on the polished floor blending with the muted hum of conversation. No one looked at her twice, yet she could feel every gaze, every whisper in the restaurant like 1,000 tiny needles on her skin. And then she saw him. Table 12. The Mafia boss. Calm, poised, utterly in control. His eyes lifted from the glass of wine he had been idly swirling, and they locked onto hers. That same unreadable expression, the same predator's patience, but now she saw it differently. She no longer felt like prey. She felt like a challenger. "You've been busy," he said softly, a slow, deliberate smile playing across his lips. "I wondered how long it would take for you to discover the truth." Leila's pulse didn't falter. "The truth isn't yours to hide anymore," she said, her voice steady. "I know what's been going on. I know who's lying. I know who's watching. And I know what you've done." A ripple of surprise crossed his face, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to tell her she had struck a nerve. "Bold words," he said, leaning back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the polished wood. "Do you understand what you're saying? Do you understand who you are confronting?" "I do," she replied, taking a step closer, the photographs and notes pressed tightly in her hands. "And I also understand that secrets have consequences. Tonight, I'm not afraid anymore." The room seemed to shift around her. Diners, staff, even the air itself held a tense, expectant energy. It was as if everyone in the restaurant sensed that the game had changed, that the balance of power had shifted in a subtle yet irrevocable way. The Mafia boss leaned forward suddenly, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried only to her. "You are clever, Leila. Smarter than I expected. But cleverness can be dangerous when wielded against me. Tell me, what have you found?" Leila slid the photographs across the table. Each image, each note, each subtle connection she had uncovered was laid bare before him. The web of lies, the secret recordings, the hidden alliances, everything was visible, undeniable. For the first time that night, the Mafia boss's expression changed. Gone was the calm predator. Instead, a flicker of something else appeared. Respect?
Shock.
Or perhaps calculation, recalibrating his next move in real time. "You've done your homework," he said slowly. "But knowledge alone doesn't save you. Courage alone doesn't save you. Do you understand that?" "I do," Leila said, her voice unwavering. "But neither does fear. I'm not afraid of you. Or anyone else. Not tonight." Then the twist hit, sharp and unexpected. From across the room, a figure stepped forward, the young man who had tried to grab her earlier. His face was pale, but his eyes were no longer filled with fear. They held determination. "Wait," he said, raising his hands. "You don't understand. He's not who you think he is. He's using you all." The Mafia boss's eyes flickered, the first sign of impatience she had seen. "Careful," he said smoothly, but there was an edge now, a subtle warning that his patience had limits. Leila glanced at the young man, then back at the boss. Something clicked. The threads of the night, the notes, the hidden cameras, the messages, the photograph of her mother, suddenly connected in her mind. She understood the full scope of the deception. Not only had the Mafia boss orchestrated a trap to test her courage, but he had also been manipulating everyone around her, even the people she thought might help. And then she realized the truth that made her blood run cold. Someone close to her, the woman who had guided her, had been feeding information to both sides. The betrayal wasn't just strategic, it was personal. Leila's chest tightened. Rage and fear collided, but instead of paralyzing her, it fueled her focus. She had the evidence, she had the insight, and now she had the opportunity. She would turn the trap into her advantage. "Enough games," she said, stepping closer to the boss, holding the photographs high so he could see them all clearly. "The lies stop here. You've underestimated me. Everyone has. But no more. Tonight, the truth comes out." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. The diners froze, phones raised, capturing the confrontation like a live performance. The Mafia boss leaned back, a slow, deliberate smile returning, but now it was different. It was no longer a smile of threat. It was the smile of a man who respected an opponent who had finally revealed her strength. "You are bold, Leila," he said softly. "Bold enough to survive tonight. Bold enough to see the truth." She held his gaze, steady and unflinching, and bold enough to expose it. Everyone deserves to know who they are dealing with. No more secrets. No more lies. Then came the revelation that shattered the room entirely. The young man stepped forward, holding a device. He activated it, and the hidden recordings, conversations, secret plans, betrayals, evidence of corruption, flooded the screens strategically placed around the restaurant. Diners gasped, some recoiling, some frozen in awe. Staff whispered frantically. The evidence was undeniable. The Mafia boss's carefully curated facade cracked, just slightly, and for the first time, he was forced to acknowledge the consequences of his actions. Leila's inner breakthrough, the clarity she had found earlier, gave her the confidence to press further. "Look around you," she said firmly. "Every lie, every manipulation, it ends tonight. And it ends with me." The room held its collective breath. The tension was almost tangible. But in that moment, Leila realized something even more profound. Victory wasn't just about exposing the Mafia boss. It was about reclaiming her power, her identity, and her voice. the courage that had been buried under fear for too long. The boss's eyes softened, just slightly, as he regarded her. He wasn't defeated, far from it, but respect had replaced the earlier arrogance. "You've grown stronger than I imagined," he said quietly. "Stronger than most. Perhaps stronger than me." Leila allowed herself a private smile, though she knew the night wasn't entirely over. There were still threads to unravel, secrets to expose, and dangers to navigate. But in this moment, she had won the first, and perhaps most important, battle. She had faced the darkness and refused to be consumed. When confronted with betrayal, danger, and deception at every turn, would you have the courage to stand your ground and face the truth? How far would you go to reclaim your power when the world is against you? Share your thoughts below. Leila's night is far from over, but she has chosen courage. What would you choose? The restaurant had transformed into a battlefield of tension. Diners froze mid-conversation, phones raised, eyes wide. Even the background hum of the city outside seemed muted, swallowed by the electricity of what was about to happen. Leila's fingers clenched around the satchel containing the photographs, notes, and recordings she had gathered, the proof of lies, manipulations, and betrayals that had haunted her all night. At table 12, the Mafia boss sat poised as if nothing were happening. Calm, collected, deadly. But tonight, she could see the subtle cracks in his composure. The careful facade of control was faltering. For the first time, someone else was in command of the narrative. Leila's legs moved before she even thought about it. Step by step, she crossed the restaurant floor, eyes locked on him. Each footfall was deliberate, purposeful, like the beat of a drum heralding a storm. She could feel every heartbeat, every breath, the adrenaline hammering through her veins. "You've underestimated me," she said, stopping just short of the table. Her voice rang clear and steady, cutting through the tension like steel. "You've underestimated everyone in this room." The Mafia boss raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, and who exactly do you think you represent? This isn't your world, Leila. Do you truly believe you can change the rules here?" Leila lifted the satchel slightly, letting the evidence peek out. "I'm not here to change the rules. I'm here to reveal them, to expose the lies, the manipulation, the secrets you've hidden so carefully." A hush fell over the room. Staff froze mid-step. Diners leaned forward, phones recording every flicker of movement. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that presses against your chest and leaves your pulse hammering. The Mafia boss leaned back slightly, an amused smirk curling across his lips. "Bold words for a waitress," he said slowly, the weight of authority in his voice. "Do you realize the danger of what you're doing? Do you realize the consequences?" "I do," she replied without hesitation. "But I've already survived more than you could imagine. And tonight, I'm not afraid." Then came the first shock. The young man who had been following her appeared at the edge of the room, stepping forward with a device in his hand. Without warning, he activated it, and the large flat screen behind the bar lit up with footage. Every hidden camera, every secret recording of the Mafia boss's manipulations, every whispered conversation that had been meant to intimidate or control, played for all to see. Diners gasped. Phones lifted higher. Staff exchanged wide-eyed looks, some whispering frantic questions. Leila held her ground, letting the evidence speak louder than her words. The photographs and notes, the carefully pieced together fragments of a secret world, now screamed the truth. "You see," she said, voice steady but charged with intensity. "Every lie, every betrayal, every manipulation you've orchestrated, all exposed." The Mafia boss's eyes narrowed, the first real sign of agitation she had seen. The calm predator had been caught off guard. For decades, he had been untouchable, feared, in control. But tonight, the dynamic had shifted. Then the second revelation struck, personal, intimate, devastating. Leila stepped closer, holding a photograph of her mother with the man she had never met, the one from the earlier note. "I know who you are," she said, her voice low but unflinching. "I know what you've done. I know how my mother was involved, and I know the part you played in keeping her secrets buried." The room fell silent. The Mafia boss's smirk faltered. He had underestimated her knowledge of the past, the subtle patterns she had uncovered, the connections only someone who had lived the shadows of this world could recognize. For a heartbeat, he was silent, calculating. Then he spoke, almost reluctantly. "Clever girl," he said softly. "I see now you've truly understood the game. Perhaps you deserve respect." Leila's pulse thundered, but she didn't flinch. Respect meant nothing if the lies continued. "It's not respect I want," she said. "It's truth. And justice. For my mother, for everyone you've tried to manipulate." The tension in the room thickened. Every eye was on them, every whisper a potential danger. And then, the final twist, the most shocking revelation yet. The woman who had helped her, the one she had trusted, stepped forward. Her voice trembled as she admitted the truth. I was working for him too, but I've realized I was wrong. Leila, everything you've uncovered is real. You've done what no one else could." Leila's jaw tightened. Betrayal had come full circle, but now she saw the opportunity. Even allies who had faltered could be brought fully to her side. The tide had turned. The Mafia boss rose slowly from his chair, his presence commanding the room. But this time, there was no intimidation, only acknowledgement of the shift in power. "You've grown stronger than I imagined," he said, almost quietly. "Stronger than anyone I've faced. Perhaps stronger than me." Leila stood tall, heart racing, mind sharp. She realized then that tonight's confrontation was not just about survival. It was about reclaiming control, finding her voice, and stepping fully into the power she had discovered throughout the night. "You may be powerful," she said, voice unwavering, "but power without truth is nothing. And tonight, the truth is here. It belongs to everyone who has been silenced, manipulated, or lied to." The recordings, the photographs, the notes, they all spoke louder than she ever could. Diners and staff alike watched as the story unfolded in real time, evidence undeniable, lies exposed, secrets revealed. Finally, he sat down, slowly, deliberately. The fight in his eyes softened, replaced by recognition. He had been outmaneuvered, not by force, not by violence, but by insight, courage, and clarity. Leila had seen the patterns, pieced together the puzzle, and faced him without fear. In that moment, victory was hers, not just over the Mafia boss, but over every shadow that had haunted her life, every secret that had been hidden, every moment she had doubted herself. She allowed herself a brief, private exhale of relief. The night's darkness had tested her in every way imaginable, physically, emotionally, morally. But she had emerged intact, stronger, wiser, and more powerful than ever. The tension that had gripped the restaurant like a living thing slowly began to ebb. The ambient hum of the city outside returned. The soft clatter of cutlery and murmured conversations resumed, though now everyone was watching, eyes wide and hearts still racing from the spectacle that had just unfolded. Leila stood near table 12, the satchel of evidence at her side, still trembling slightly from adrenaline, but her posture was unshakably confident. She had faced fear head-on, outmaneuvered a man who had controlled so much of her world, and uncovered the truths that had long haunted her. The restaurant that had once felt like a cage now seemed like a stage where she had finally claimed the role she had always been destined for. Not a victim, but a survivor, a force to be reckoned with. The Mafia boss remained seated, calm yet disarmed in a way she had never imagined he could be. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, now held a glimmer of recognition, an acknowledgement that she had earned a place in a world that few could navigate without being consumed. "You've done something remarkable tonight, Leila," he said quietly, voice stripped of menace. "You've exposed truths that could have destroyed lives, yet you've carried it with clarity, courage, and purpose. Not everyone could have done that." Leila's chest tightened, not with fear, but with the weight of triumph. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "I was terrified every step of the way. But fear didn't stop me. I chose to act, to face what others tried to hide, and I refused to be silenced." For the first time, she allowed herself to fully process the journey she had endured, the moments of terror, betrayal, and doubt. She remembered the notes, the hidden recordings, the photograph of her mother, and every shadow that had seemed to move with intent. Every step had led her here, and now the darkness she had faced was giving way to clarity. The young man who had tried to intervene approached cautiously, his earlier fear replaced by cautious admiration. You did it," he whispered, almost in awe. "I didn't think anyone could stand against him and live to tell the tale." Leila gave a small, almost shy smile. "You don't live through nights like this by being timid. You survive by understanding, observing, and making your move at the right moment. And sometimes you just have to trust yourself when everyone else doubts you." The woman who had helped her, the one whose loyalty had wavered in the shadows, stepped forward. Tears glimmered in her eyes as she said softly, "I was wrong to doubt you. You showed me what courage really looks like. I thank you." Leila placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We all make mistakes," she said gently. "What matters is what we do after. You chose to stand with me when it counted. That's what matters now." The Mafia boss rose slowly, drawing the attention of everyone in the restaurant. "Leila," he said, voice resonant, "you've proven yourself more capable, more insightful, and braver than I could have anticipated. Tonight, you've not only survived, you've changed the rules of the game." She took a steadying breath, the adrenaline ebbing into a calm determination. "The rules aren't meant for anyone to control, not like you tried to. Everyone deserves to know the truth. Secrets have consequences, and tonight, everyone will see them." He regarded her thoughtfully, a subtle nod acknowledging her words. Then, almost imperceptibly, he stepped back, allowing the room, and her, to reclaim the space. For the first time, she felt the weight of fear lift, replaced by something far more powerful, the sense that she had earned her victory through wit, courage, and resilience. Leila looked around the room, noticing the diners who had silently witnessed the confrontation, the staff whose whispered glances now held respect, and the subtle shift in energy that indicated the balance had changed. She realized that victory wasn't just personal, it was collective. She had given others courage simply by standing her ground. By refusing to be silenced, she had inspired those around her to see that even the most insurmountable shadows could be challenged. Her eyes fell on the photograph of her mother that had started this chain of revelations. A quiet smile touched her lips. The woman she had lost, or thought she had lost, had left a legacy in the smallest of clues, a puzzle that now felt complete. Her mother's courage, subtle and hidden, had guided her here. And now, Leila could honor that legacy, not by hiding in fear, but by living boldly, openly, and truthfully. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of relief and triumph. All the fear, the uncertainty, the sleepless nights, and the doubts. The darkness had been necessary to discover the strength she never knew she had. She had been tested, and she had prevailed. The young man approached again, holding a chair for her to sit. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked, voice tentative. Leila shook her head, smiling softly.
"Not tonight," she said.
"Tonight we breathe. Tomorrow we decide what comes next. But tonight I've won more than just a fight. I've won clarity, courage, and control of my life." The woman who had helped her added, "And you've given me hope that we can choose our own path, even when the world tries to dictate it for us." Leila nodded, feeling the significance of the night settle like a weight lifted off her shoulders.
"Exactly.
We may not be able to change everything at once, but we can start by facing the truths we've been avoiding. And that's exactly what we've done tonight." As she glanced around the room one last time, Leila realized how much she had changed. The timid, uncertain young woman who had begun her shift that evening was gone. In her place stood someone unyielding, courageous, and fully aware of her own power. She had faced shadows, betrayal, and manipulation, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The Mafia boss, still seated at table 12, met her gaze one last time. "You've earned this night, Leila. Remember it. Not as victory over me, but as victory over fear itself." She allowed herself a small, private smile. Victory over fear. That was the lesson she would carry beyond the walls of this restaurant, beyond the night that had tested every fiber of her being. Finally, she allowed herself to exhale fully, releasing the tension that had gripped her for hours. She had uncovered the truth, confronted the shadows, and reclaimed control over her own story. And as she walked through the restaurant, leaving behind whispers of awe and admiration, she felt the first real sense of peace in a long time. The night had been dark, terrifying, and uncertain, but it had ended with clarity, courage, and truth. Leila had won, not just over the Mafia boss, but over every fear, doubt, and limitation that had ever threatened to define her. The first light of dawn crept softly through the restaurant's tall windows, casting a pale glow over the polished floors and the now quiet dining room. The events of the previous night had left a lingering electricity in the air, like the calm that follows a storm, where everything seemed sharper, clearer, and full of possibility. Leila stood behind the counter, the satchel of evidence now safely secured in a locker she had borrowed from a trusted contact. She felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, the kind of fatigue that comes after surviving something that tested every fiber of your being. Her hands still trembled slightly, but this time it wasn't fear. It was the aftershock of triumph, a physical reminder of how much she had endured and overcome. For a long moment, she simply breathed, letting the silence and early morning light wash over her. She thought of the chaos, the fear, the betrayals, the near misses, and the countless calculations she had made in the span of a few hours. And through it all, she realized something profound. She had changed. Forever. The staff began to arrive, bleary-eyed and cautious, whispers spreading through the room like a gentle current. Some approached her hesitantly, unsure if she would be angry, exhausted, or vengeful. But when they saw her calm, composed demeanor and the faint but unmistakable confidence in her eyes, their apprehension melted into admiration. You did it," said one of the servers softly, awe and disbelief in his voice. No one thought anyone could stand up to him like that, let alone survive. Leila smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling slightly. "I didn't just survive," she said, voice quiet but resolute. "I learned. I acted. And I refused to let fear control me. That's the difference." Another staff member, a young woman who had once doubted her, stepped forward. "And you've shown us all what courage looks like," she whispered, "even when it seemed impossible." Leila nodded, feeling the weight of their words. Courage, she realized, was contagious. The ripple of her actions had already begun to spread beyond herself, inspiring those around her to see that fear could be faced, that silence could be broken, and that even the most intimidating forces could be challenged when the truth was on your side. As the morning sun continued to rise, Leila allowed herself a private reflection. The night had tested her in ways she could never have imagined. The Mafia boss, an emblem of control, fear, and power, had been outmaneuvered, not through violence, but through clarity, courage, and insight. The web of secrets and lies that had threatened to entangle her life had been unraveled, thread by thread. And through it all, she had discovered something far more valuable than survival: herself. She thought of the small notes from her mother, the hidden photographs, the messages left behind like breadcrumbs for the determined. For years, she had lived in the shadow of uncertainty, doubt, and fear. But now, she had stepped fully into the light, armed with knowledge, courage, and a sense of purpose. The world was still complicated, still dangerous, but she no longer felt powerless within it. The woman who had helped her during the night approached quietly, offering a tentative smile. I want to say thank you," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I didn't always make the right choices, but seeing you the way you handled everything, it's changed me. You've shown me that we can reclaim control, even when we think it's impossible." Leila reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's not about being perfect," she said. "It's about choosing to act, even when it's terrifying. About choosing to face the truth, even when it hurts. You've made that choice too, and that's what matters." They stood together in silence for a moment, the quiet only punctuated by the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant city noises outside. It was a rare moment of calm after a night that had felt endless, chaotic, and perilous. And in that calm, Leila finally felt the magnitude of what she had accomplished. Her thoughts drifted to the Mafia boss one last time. He had been a formidable adversary, intelligent, ruthless, and cunning, but he had also been a teacher in his own way. Not a mentor, not a friend, but a test. Through him, she had discovered the depths of her courage, the sharpness of her insight, and the resilience of her spirit. She realized that confrontation, even with fearsome forces, was not just about survival. It was about claiming one's own power and refusing to be defined by intimidation or manipulation. Leila straightened, feeling a sense of completion wash over her. The night had left scars, memories she would carry, lessons she would never forget, but it had also given her something far more enduring: strength, clarity, and a sense of destiny that she could finally embrace. The sun had fully risen now, bathing the restaurant in golden light. Diners trickled in, oblivious to the night's chaos, bringing normalcy back to a place that had been a stage for extraordinary events. Leila moved among them, serving coffee and smiles, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about what came next, not just for her, but for everyone whose lives had intersected with hers during the night's tumult. She felt a sense of responsibility, but not one that weighed heavily. It was a quiet, powerful awareness. She had been entrusted with truth, courage, and clarity, and now she could use it to guide, protect, and inspire. And more than that, she realized that life's shadows, its lies, betrayals, and fears, were not something to run from. They were something to face, navigate, and transform into strength. Finally, she paused at the window, looking out over the city as sunlight danced on the streets below. Her reflection stared back at her, steady, confident, and unafraid. She had faced the darkness, confronted betrayal, uncovered secrets, and survived danger that could have consumed anyone else. And in doing so, she had found a power within herself that could never be taken away. For the first time in her life, Leila felt fully, completely free. The night had tested her in every way imaginable, but she had emerged triumphant, not just in surviving, but in reclaiming her life, her voice, and her courage. She whispered to herself, almost in awe, "This is only the beginning." When life challenges you with fear, deception, or betrayal, will you face it head-on, or let it define you? What would you risk to reclaim your voice, your power, and your truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Leila faced the darkness and chose courage. What would you choose? The restaurant had returned to its quiet rhythm, but the night's events had left an indelible mark, not just on Leila, but on everyone who had witnessed her courage. She had faced fear, deception, and betrayal head-on, and emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. What began as a simple night of serving tables had turned into a journey of survival, clarity, and empowerment. Leila's story reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the choice to act despite it. That even in the darkest moments, when everything seems lost, we have the power to reclaim our voice, stand tall, and confront the truths we've long avoided. So, ask yourself, when faced with danger, betrayal, or secrets that threaten to overwhelm you, would you stand like Leila did? Would you find the strength to speak the truth, even when the world expects you to stay silent? If this story inspired you, or made you think about your own courage and resilience, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your own experiences, or even the moments when you found your inner strength. We'd love to hear your story. And don't forget, every ending is also a beginning. Like Leila, you too can face the shadows, confront your fears, and emerge stronger than ever. Thank you for watching, and remember, courage always starts with a single step.